Welcome to the pilot launch of reincarnation astrology. I'm going to try to do these videos in 10 to 15 minute sketches rather than long jaunts. And today is going to be the case of James Leininger, who was born April 10th, 1998, in San Mateo, California. At the age of about 2, he started to have night terrors and would tell his parents, airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out. And over the course of the next few years, he began to divulge information about a character that his parents knew nothing about, but would spend the next few years researching. Long story short, they discover a man by the name of James McCready Huston Jr., who had been born in South Bend, Indiana in 1923, I believe. We'll look at the chart in case I got the date wrong. And this case has been well documented. Carol Bowman became involved. It's been on television, ABC and Fox and everything, and it's all available on YouTube. It's probably one of the most well documented prospective reincarnation cases there has been. Um, I won't describe the case much as it's exhaustively researched, and there's a book called Soul Survivor, which you can read. I got the book on Audible. I'm nearly finished with it. I know that this case was in Leslie Kean's Surviving Death, which went on to Netflix. Read that book as well. So it's one of the most well documented cases of prospective reincarnation. Jaw dropping fact after jaw dropping fact. And even the skeptics that try to debunk it are pretty humorously, they can't do it. And so what I am doing is taking cases like this and looking at the birth time of these two different personas and seeing what we can see. And let me tell you that this is one of the most remarkable cases I've ever come across. And I've come across a few, and I hope to share most of them with you on here. This is the first video I've ever made for anything, so um, enjoy the ride. I'm going to go to the share screen right now. Someday I'm going to be really good at this. I'm going to look back and follow this together. So, okay, let's go to the overlapping birth charts of James 2 and James 3. Now, James McCready Jr., his father was named James as well. And there's quite the story of James Sr. showing up at, what are they even called? Reunions for World War II to see if anybody knew about his son, why he hadn't come back from the war, because it wasn't well documented. He was MIA. And so James Leininger, as a child, would draw pictures of airplanes incessantly. He was obsessed with airplanes. He would crash them like a typical young child. However, this level of obsession was over the top, and I highly encourage anyone to get on YouTube and look up this case if you haven't seen it. It's pretty remarkable, but interestingly, all of the drawings he would make as a kid, he would sign it as James 3. So his subconscious knew that he was the third James to come along. So, all right, now let's talk about something that I actually really know about. Here is James 3's chart, and here is James Huston Jr.'s chart, October 22nd, 1923. And I'll show you why I believe he was born about 8 in the evening. We don't have a birth time for James McCready Huston Jr., but I'm getting better and better at rectifying when I have the time of death. And so this is why I think that. However, you don't really need to have an ascendant, and you don't really need to know the exact degree of the moon to be able to do this work. Interesting thing is that about midnight on the 22nd, the moon had just gone into Aries, so we know that his moon is indeed in Aries. So let's look at these two charts. We do have a birth time that's published with a good Rodden rating on astro.com, and I'm using astro.com. Anybody who watches this, you can get on there yourself and replicate this and explore at will. I'll probably go to my Kala software and show you how I've done a rectification on James 2's chart. Now, one of the first things that an astrologer will look for in reincarnation cases is the South Node. It's the most well known in both technical documents and in kind of the colloquial, I don't know how to call it, but there's basically urban legends of astrology. And the biggest urban legend, which turns out to be true, is the South Node points to the past life. Well, what are the odds that James 3 would be born on the exact nodal return of James 2? That's right. If you look down here, we can see that Ketu and Rahu, as we say in Vedic astrology, the north and south nodes of the moon are exactly conjunct. My wife died on my no return exactly, so I do know that these moments are important from my own personal experience. And so the simple odds of this happening in the case of a child who remembers a past life is, well, these nodes return to the same location every 18 years. So you can start doing the math. This is statistically improbable. Now, if we add a few more other things that are statistically improbable, the statistics begin to go through the roof, and you have to say there's no way that this can be mere chance. So the next thing we're going to look at is Saturn. Now, James 3 was born on the exact Saturn opposition of James 2. And you'll notice that here in Aries and here in Libra, cardinal signs, James 3 has the Sun, Saturn, Mars, and Mercury all in said sign. And exactly the opposite, James 2 had Sun, Saturn, Mercury, and Mars in the same sign. The statistics just went through the roof. There are no odds anymore. Now, to have the nodal return every 18 years sync up with the Saturn opposition, the Saturn opposition that occurred in between the death of James 2 and the birth of James 3 was in 1968, 1969, and the nodes were nowhere near a return. In fact, I don't know if this ever does happen in other people's charts. It is become clear to me that this case won't actually be a good prototype because it's so rare that this would happen. All I can think is that this particular soul wanted to make a point and drive it home very significantly by being born exactly at a moment which just would never occur again. So it would be remarkable to have a stellium of the same personal planets in exactly opposite signs, but to place Saturn in a perfect opposition in the same degree, it just goes above and beyond. Now, what would be even more above and beyond if there was another planet? Let's say Saturn, which is the slowest moving planet, aligns. Mercury, the fastest moving planet, look, 13 degrees, 13 degrees, a perfect opposition once more. What are the odds of that? Okay, let's throw another one in there. How about the Sun of James 2 being at 28 degrees of Libra, and then Mars being at 28 degrees of Aries, the third perfect opposition. Now, only two planets are the same. Now, you have different planets making an opposition, but nonetheless, the Sun and what is it here? Mars of James 2 They don't make the opposition, but to have the nodal return, Mercury and Saturn, this is it. I mean, you can imagine what was going through my head as I was looking at this. So this is one of the strongest synastry charts I've ever seen amongst any two things in history. um, we'll add that this Lilith point, now Lilith is the part of the ecliptic of the moon that is the furthest away from the Earth. It's part of the north node and south node of the moon. It's that same ecliptic. And that point in James 3's chart is also on that Mercury point at 13 degrees of Libra Aries axis. So here, oh, okay. And then the moon is also exactly opposite. I don't know how to describe it. So they each have 4 planets in a cardinal sign with the moon exactly opposite, and it's the same cardinal sign. It's just, you know, I don't even have words for it. This is it's shooting fish in a barrel. That's how I would describe it. So one of the things that I've seen in cases of reincarnation is planets that aspect the nodes. And here we see the Venus of James 2 in a sextile trine relationship. And it's not perfectly to the degree, but it is within a like 30-second orb, which is harmonically spot on. Um, so that this is a we're going to see is patterns in emerging. I'm going to do a bunch of these charts, and we're going to start to see patterns, principles will emerge, and we will be able to create what to look for, a bit of a checklist. And the way Vedic astrology is done is you get a checklist of things you need to check, and need to confirm, and you look for confluence. And when you get enough boxes checked, then you know you're good. You don't just go on one thing. You need lots and lots of confirmation. So the interesting thing is, of all the personal planets, you only have 2 outliers. You have Venus and you have Jupiter that aren't part of the stellium, right? And so in James 3's chart, you've got Scorpio hosting Jupiter and Venus. And so those 2 planets are significant because they're outliers. Now, if we look at James 3's chart, we're going to look to his south node to tell us about his past lives. And what 2 planets are exactly conjunct the south node? It's Jupiter and it's Venus. So that should speak for itself. This is just, it's quite frankly amazing. I will become more eloquent with this as I go on. Don't worry. But this is not a bad way to cut your teeth, doing the easy thing. So what were the other things I wanted to show about this chart? Oh yeah, I've excluded the outer planets, and based on a work sitting right next to me by Jeffrey Wolf Green called Pluto, The Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. I mean, he's an evolutionary astrologer, and reincarnation is a key theme. And so he would say to look for Pluto, making a strong aspect to personal planets. And I believe I can, as we do this, yeah, turn on. If anybody wants to get onto this website, they can. It's free at first. Yeah, you can have like 200 charts for free. So, all right, here it's going to get all cluttered. But Pluto, if we're looking for Pluto to make a strong aspect, it is yet in another cardinal sign making a square to from 12 degrees of Cancer. It's making a basically harmonically perfect square to this Mercury axis, which also includes this Lilith point. The sun being a slight outlier because it doesn't make a perfect opposition in James 3's chart, is making a perfect trine to the Neptune in James 2's chart. And yeah, the Uranus is making And in conjunct, it's a 150-degree aspect, but to the degree. So if we're going to use degrees. It doesn't work to just have things being in the same sign, or it, means you can twist things so much with astrology and convince yourself of anything, really. But if you stick with the math, notice I'm not giving you an interpretation of anything. I don't care about interpretations. What I care about is math and statistics. And what are the odds that these two personas would have such a perfect mathematical harmony? That's that constitutes proof in a big way. Um, and there'll be a time to do some interpretations of it. So I think that's one of the most important things to be looking at in this case. And I did notice that Chiron is in James 3's chart is also in Scorpio, where these two personal planets ended up on the south node. It's pretty remarkable. So this is the first sketch. I have other ways to look into it, and I'm going to break it down video by video. I'm going to exit the share screen, and I want to go into Kala and show you all how I came to the wee conclusion that James 2 was born in the evening. Now, this is what here I have. Come on now. Yeah. Okay, so James Leininger's chart here. Oh, and the Varshafal. Yeah, so he hasn't come to a Saturn return yet. So the Saturn opposition for James 3 has only occurred once. This is how rare, and that happens every 29 years. So you have a cycle of 29 years and a cycle of 18 years that need to align perfectly. It's not even going to happen again. And that's why I say that this case it's too good. You can begin to derive certain principles, but you're not going to find this case repeated again and again. And one astrological interpretation I will give is that this soul wanted to make a point and drive it home. This case needed to be airtight. So it seems like there's a whole bunch of souls who are ready to make a big demonstration as to a deeper level of the nature of reality. And so we're getting cases like this showing up. And I need to get out of the waterfall and go to the main screen. So yeah, here is one thing I will say about James Leininger's chart. And he's 25 years old right now. If anybody wants to send this to him and they know him, send it to him. I'm not going to put this out on YouTube until I get permission or something like that. So this is just for the Patreon crew for now. But if you got 4 planets in the 7th house and that sun rules the 11th house, these are the two signs that are going to bring you into public prominence. And then the chart ruler is Venus because it rules Libra, and that's in the 6th house down here with that south node. So you can see a chart of someone who's going to come to prominence, and his past life is going to rule his entire chart. And I know that his young life, he really experienced this stuff. You can hear him talk about it. It really dominated his world, and the night terrors were severe. Like it was, when you read the book, he had them like 5 times a week for years. It wasn't just this occasional thing. So, highly recommend uh, finding some documentaries, if not at least reading the whole book. They really filled the book up with a bunch of stuff because that's how they write popular books. But I went through it anyway. Okay, so James McCready, we don't have a birth time for him, but what I did when we know that he dies at age 21 at Chichijima on March 3rd, and I have a chart for that. We'll get into that later. What we go to is the Varshafal, and I'm going to go to his 21st year. And someday I'll make a good tutorial of how to do this. But when the ascendant changes about every 2 hours. So you can change the birth time and watch the Varsifal change. And the year that someone dies on their birthday, the stars are going to give it away. I have personal examples of this, which I will get around to sharing, and it's kind of freaky jaw-dropping. It's how I know I'm gonna live for a long time. I'm trying to take care of my knees because the stars don't let me die for a while. Holy cow. So what we need to look at is the second house and the seventh house because those are makara houses. They're death-causing houses, and the ruler of the second house is the sun, which is Leo, and the ruler of the seventh house is Saturn. So what we want to see is, are there planets in these houses, and or where are the rulers of those houses? Saturn is in the first house, the house of the body, the house of the self. Saturn is a killer. So anytime you have a marker in the first house, is it's one of the checks in the boxes, and you need a few more checks. You need 5, 6, something like that, and then you can predict that. Um, and then we have Shahams, which I'll show you. So we're looking at the sun to be another typifier of death. And anytime you're going to die, you've got to look at the Mrityu Shaham, which is the death Shaham. The death Shaham is in Libra, right along with the sun. So if you have a Makra planet conjunct the death Shaham, if you have the other Makra planet in the first house, it doesn't look good. And this happens when the birth chart is set for about 8 p.m. in the evening. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to look at is the chart that we get. And what we see here is a chart ruled by Mercury. Mercury rules flight. So my druthers were to, given he lives till 21, he's got a short life, and then he dies in an airplane crash. His whole world is ruled by flight. So a Mercury rising would be the best I can come up with. Now, if we could ever get his birth certificate, if it does exist, I could be corrected. I can stand corrected. And it doesn't really matter. This does not impact the synastry of reincarnation. But I like to have a good birth time if I can get one. And so one of the things I had just heard in an Ernst Wilhelm class that I was taking, that if the nodes are in the fourth and 10th houses, skiers or mountain bicyclists who ride downhill like to have the nodes going north node in the bottom, south node in the top. And people who fly things like to have the north node in the 10th house and the south node in the fourth house. Now, we would want to see the opposite of this, but if what this persona is remembered most for is crashing an airplane, and you have the nodes going down towards the ground, that it just kind of dawned on me yesterday. And this is where intuition kicks in with astrology, and science is like rolls its eyes. But nonetheless, that's where we're at with this. So this is why I think that it's fairly accurate. If anybody in the world wants to send me this time for James McCready Huston Jr., I'd be pleased. I would love to stand corrected. So nonetheless, I hope that is enough to get going. There's a statistical analysis that can be done of like what are the odds of all these planets lining up exactly as they do. We have 1, 2, 3 perfect conjunctions of the same planets, and then a fourth conjunction of not the same planet, Mars, the sun. Kind of amazing. Why am I the person who is doing this chart? Well, this is interesting. James McCready Huston Jr. has Jupiter in the exact same degree as I have Jupiter, 22 degrees of Scorpio. And then the sun of his, making that opposition to that Mars, is the same, very same degree that I have a Saturn Pluto opposition. And my dad has Mercury exactly opposite, and so did my great great grandfather and all this stuff. So holy cow, it goes like that. Even the fact that I am the one making this video can kind of be seen in the chart. Heck. Anyway, welcome to the Matrix, folks. I hope you are enjoying your stay. It won't last that long. It'll seem like nothing when you're done. I love you all. Thanks for watching. This is only the beginning. That's right. We have only just begun. And I'm going to end this.